My name is Roger Buck, and today we're going to talk about something boring. At least, it's something that I don't really find very exciting, and if I'm honest, I don't actually think many of my viewers are going to find it very exciting either. And yet, here's the strange thing. It's actually something that I found very exciting for a very long time in my life. For a very long time I was inspired by it. For close to 20 years I poured my life's energy into this. What are we talking about? Well, as you'll be beginning to gather, I'm talking about the New Age movement. Because as I write about in my books, and as I've said in other videos, I was something of a New Age activist for close to 20 years of my life in Britain. I was also at the Findhorn community for about 3 of those. Findhorn being one of the most famous, maybe the most famous New Age community in the world. So obviously for all those years, the New Age meant something to me. And now it doesn't. It's really a subject that really is utterly unenlivening. And I feel I need to talk to you about it today. And I hope that you'll listen to me. Because even though it's not very interesting, I think it really, really needs to be talked about. Now, what I'm trying to get at here are these 2 psychological states. The psychological state where for 20 years this captivated me. And now the psychological state where it means nothing at all. What I found in the Catholic Church is infinitely richer, infinitely more meaningful than anything I ever found at Findhorn, anything I ever found in all that experience in the New Age. But not only am I talking about 2 different psychological states here, who I was in the past and who I am now, I'm also talking, of course, about 2 different kinds of psychology that we find in the world today. Because plenty of people are like the person I once was. They do find New Age-ism very interesting. They're captivated by it. They're fascinated by it. And then there's the psychology of who I am now and who, friends, I imagine you're like, that don't really find this very interesting at all. So, what are these 2 psychologies? And I think a way I'm going to go into this is how all this came up for me this week is that I was on Facebook, and there's a Facebook friend I have there. I've never met her, but she strikes me as quite New Agey. And she was excited, it seemed, by this t-shirt. And I'm going to show you the t-shirt. I was very struck by the t-shirt. The t-shirt had these slogans on them. Birthplace, Earth. Race, human. Politics, freedom. Religion, love. So, we have 2 kinds of people that we're talking about here. We're having the people that are obviously buying these shirts, or the kind of person who puts it up on Facebook and is obviously stimulated by this. And then we have people like myself now, at least today, who wouldn't be caught dead in a shirt like that. And I imagine that goes the same for most of the people typically watching this video. Now, it would be very easy to mock this shirt, but I'm going to try not to do that. I just want to talk about the psychologies here. In the second kind of psychology, this shirt is boring. So for the second kind of person, a Catholic traditionalist like myself, indeed other kinds of traditionalists or conservatives, they're actually going to take joy or delight in something very different from this. They're going to take delight in the personal, the particular. So rather than being interested in something abstract like birthplace Earth, they're going to be interested in where people come from. Or they're going to be interested that God created different peoples And their own people is going to be important to them. So coming up with something incredibly empty and abstract like human race, this isn't going to thrill them or speak to them or mean anything to them. Similarly, reducing all of politics to freedom without thinking of politics in terms of justice or duty or order, that's not going to, politics is freedom. What's that going to mean to a Catholic traditionalist? Or religion as love? Well, very clearly, love is the central factor of the Christian religion. It's not necessarily the central factor in all religions, but love is central to what Christianity is. Nonetheless, it's very hard to love. It's actually very, very hard to love. Of course, if you get adulation, if you're a pop star, if people like you, it's easy to like them back. Where it gets really tough to love is where people don't like you, or to really sacrifice yourself. So we have these kind of empty slogans like, the Beatles, John Lennon singing, "All you need is love," and not really realizing that a great deal is needed to love. And personally, what I've found in my journey from being a New Ager to a Catholic is that nothing in this world has helped me more to love than the Catholic sacraments. That's a subject I want to go into at another time. My point here now is that these kinds of things, freedom, love, birthplace, earth, are likely to be terribly, terribly unsatisfying for the second kind of person that I'm talking about here. What I'm trying to get at here is that the second type of person realizes that, yes, differentiation is important. There's something very beautiful and important about differentiation. In fact, as an aside here, just a little bit more on love. Love, true love, depends on differentiation. And that's a point that over my years in the New Age, I see is often lost. New Agers, and we'll probably get into this soon, have a key word. That key word is oneness, oneness, oneness. And it rather ties in, as I hope to explore, with this whole kind of attitude of becoming abstract and becoming as undifferentiated as possible. Whereas the Christian, the Catholic, so often begins to realize that differentiation is actually an incredibly vital thing. It's necessary to love. So, in the New Age movement, you'll often hear about loving yourself. And I would really question that. Can one love oneself? Well, of course, in one sense, there are many of us who have a lot of self-criticism, a lot of self-hatred, and it's important to overcome those things. It's important to be kind to oneself. But if I work on loving myself, I'm not really doing that for anybody else except me. I'm the one who's going to gain from it. And maybe I'll gain some good things. But loving you as a separate, different, personal being from myself, if I'm really about loving you, that's not something I do for my own gain. If it's real love for you, then I'm gaining nothing from it. It's something that I'm giving to you through the grace of God. Anyway, that's a huge aside on the nature of love. What I really want to talk about are these two different kinds of psychology. Now, in trying to think about the New Age movement, I have found it helpful to think in terms of a New Age psychology, a New Age set of attitudes, a New Age mindset. It's a mindset that I used to inhabit myself. Because it's actually very difficult to talk about the New Age. There's something very elusive about it, and actually part of the problem, I maintain, is that New Agers actually have this psychology very often of wanting to be elusive, wanting to be vague, wanting to be undefined, wanting to find terms that say very little at all. In fact, New Agers usually reject the term New Age. What you'll usually find there is there's this sense of, don't give us a label, don't give us a name, we're not a religion, we're just free spirits. And that gives the New Age a lot of power. Unfortunately, I think the New Age is a very powerful religious system that's in denial of being a religious system. And it's very necessary to get to the root of this, which I try to do in my books, and I'm going to try to do here. But yeah, it can be very confusing. In fact, another kind of form of confusion that happens is that sometimes when people think I'm talking about the New Age, they think I'm talking about little old ladies who are going to mediums or in seances, or they think I'm just talking about people who are into various forms of diagnosing the future, like, you know, the I Ching or astrology or reading tea leaves or gazing into crystals or things like that. I will try to be clearer what I mean. There's a problem here in that the New Age seems to me like it has something like a hard core of people, and then a sort of greater penumbra outside of the core. So in the hard core, there are people that are really deeply committed. You know, they go and live at places like Findhorn, like I did, or they go on New Age workshops that are really, you know, often quite expensive, and they really throw their lives. You know, they'll read some of the key New Age texts. You know, a very key one is called A Course in Miracles, which is said to be dictated by Jesus. And a lot of the New Age texts are like channeled like this. They claim that the author is not the ordinary everyday author who wrote the book, but that the author is channeling Jesus or some Eastern master or even an extraterrestrial. So there are people that are really, really into all these things. They read the books, they go to the workshops, they go to places like Findhorn. So that's the kind of hardcore of the movement I mean. But that's not just what I mean by New Age, because basically this New Age psychology that's shared by the hardcore has generalized outwards now into a much, much wider group of people that seem to me, even if they're not reading the core New Age texts or going to Findhorn, they're sharing many of the same attitudes. These attitudes that I've said, that's, you know, spirituality is all about oneness. Spirituality is all about being abstract. You know, one can be spiritual without being religious. A very core New Age idea, of course, is that religion is useless. And as I said before, New Agers, said in another video, New Agers often have two different takes on that. They either believe that religion has always been useless, and simply got in the way of one's spiritual search, or they believe that we're evolving towards a higher form of consciousness. And so back in something that's often called the Age of Pisces, we needed religion. But now we're in this glorious new age of Aquarius. Our consciousnesses have evolved. We're no longer, quite as messed up as we used to be, and now we don't need religion. All of these are sort of ideas, doctrines, I would even say dogmas, that are taken very seriously. They're taken very seriously by the New Age core, but then, as I say, they generalize out to a wider group of people that aren't necessarily in that core. And in my opinion, it's something very serious indeed, which is why I'm actually hoping that traditional Catholics like myself will actually watch this video, even though they may find the subject pretty darn tedious. But I want to give you an example give you a story from my life, just a little anecdote that indicates what I'm seeing is really so threatening to the West. So, back when I was a New Ager, right at the very beginning, back in the, I actually got first interested in the New Age in 1979 when I was 15 years old. If one wanted to find New Age books, one had to go to specialist bookshops. I had to go into London. I had to really search them out. Well, that's not the case anymore. New Age books, are everywhere. In fact, a number of years ago, there's this massive, massive bookshop in London, Waterstones Piccadilly. It's reputedly the biggest bookshop in Europe. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it claims to be. And out of curiosity, I just decided to go and look at the kind of religion section. And there were these massive, massive bookshelves, huge, devoted to Christianity. And there were 4 of them. Okay? Huge, huge amount of books on Christianity. Then I decided to go and see what the New Age section was like. And it was called Mind, Body, Spirit. And I started to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 30. There were 30. And this was not, Waterstones Piccadilly in London is not a specialised bookshop. It presumably reflects what people in London want to read. And so you had a kind of mirror there. New Age, 30. Christianity, 4. That's an enormous change in just the last 30 years or 40 years since I became deeply interested in the New Age. It's an enormous shift in society. And I think why I'm making this video, even though, and why I've written my books about, that go into the New Age, is that I am concerned that many Catholics are really not aware enough of what's happening here, and we need to be aware of what's going on. In fact, it's my observation that the Catholic community and the New Age community are often like 2 gigantic ships in the night that hardly know anything about the other. Certainly when I was a New Ager, I knew nothing about Catholicism. I tended to think of Christians in terms of evangelical Protestants. I tended to think that they were some sort of dying breed of dinosaurs or Neanderthals trapped in the old age of Pisces. A lot of New Agers do talk like that for all their claim of being universal and embracing all religions. They talk about it embracing all religions a lot, but if you actually listen to what they say about Christianity, well, it's very revealing. But yes, the New Age is a huge ship in the night, and Catholics need to be aware of it. It has enormous power, and really, I'm going to say it's a menace to the West, it's a menace to Christendom. And it's not necessarily a menace for the obvious reasons. A lot of people may be suspicious that New Agers are into occult practices or even Satanists and things like that. No, I'm going to say that the vast number of New Agers are actually people with noble intentions. They're seeking a better world. And the real danger that I see is along the lines of what I've been telling you about, this sort of terrible abstraction, this terrible, I would say, reduction of humanity that comes from trying to be one with all life without awareness of differentiation, without really knowing what love is, with the negation of religion that happens, with the idea that religion belongs to some past age of Pisces. These are indications of what I think some of the real menaces of the New Age are. And the irony is that New Agers are often very kind, very sensitive, very good people trying to build a better world. So I really want to say that about New Agers, but I also, yes. I might call this video, in fact, something like Introduction to the New Age Menace. It's a provocative title, but I do see it menacing the West. And I also want to say that this, I wish I said it earlier actually, this is simply an introductory video. I can't go into the huge complex nature of the whole New Age in this video. In fact, I'm going to be doing a series of videos about it, where I go into all these things in more detail, just like I go into them in more detail in my books. I have 2 books. My most recent one is called Cor Jesu Sacratissimum, and it goes into the New Age along with a lot of other things to do with Christendom and the renewal of Christendom. And then I have an earlier book that's much lighter and much more accessible. It's called The Gentle Traditionalist, and that also touches on the New Age as well. Anyway, I thought I'd just read you a very small section of my book, The Gentle Traditionalist, which is very germane to everything we're talking about. And here I just need to say that The Gentle Traditionalist is a set of dialogues. There's a character, the Gentle Traditionalist, who enters into dialogues with different folk representing different perspectives, so atheists, secular people, and he enters into a dialogue with a couple of New Age characters. And one of them has taken a quite extreme step. So when the Gentle Traditionalist asks him his name, this is what he says: "Me? I don't have a name. It's better that way." People get too hung up on naming things. Pretty soon, we're all divided from each other. And so the Gentle Traditionalist says to him, "Well, I have to call you something. Can I call you No Name for now?" And this character says, "Hey, yeah, that's cool." No Name smiled. "I like that. If only everyone had no name. There'd be no more wars and killing and religion and stuff like that." The Gentle Traditionalist says, "Where are you from, No Name?" And he replies, "Same place as you're from, the universe." Years after I became a Catholic, I actually met a New Age type who said that to me. I asked him where he was from, and he said, "Same place as you're from, the universe." And it stuck in me. And I used that as a basis for this character, who's really taking this to the ultimate limit. This idea that we have to get away from all differentiation. We're all just children of the one universe. And his ultimate step is to get rid of his name. That's the kind of logical progression of a lot of New Age thinking, that we just meld into this oneness. Now, it needs to be said that I'm just speaking in very broad strokes. Indeed, I said I didn't want to mock, and I'm a little bit concerned that I have been mocking, turning New Agers into cartoons. I need to say that not all New Agers are like the man I just spoke to. In fact, most of them aren't. Most of them are far more sensitive and sophisticated and don't speak in terms like that. So I'm trying a tough task to speak about general New Age tendencies that I have seen and that I've experienced. I want to be fair. People give me different kinds of feedback. Some people say that I'm being too harsh to the New Age. I should be grateful that there's an aspiring to something spiritual in a materialistic and increasingly atheistic age like ours. That may be so that I'm being too harsh. Others say, no, I'm really not going far enough. That this is such a destructive element to Christianity in the West, and we need to talk about it in tough terms. So I get different kinds of feedback, and I'm struggling. I think what I'm really saying here is that in this first video, I just do need to speak in these very broad, general categories, and then as the videos continue, and we will be going into other aspects, I mean, not necessarily all at once. I have so many other things besides the New Age that I want to talk about. But we will be talking about these first things that I'm laying down. We'll be unpacking them. We'll also be talking about where they come from, the philosophies they come from, which are mainly Eastern religions. We'll be going into all of that, I hope. I also want to talk more personally about my experience at Findhorn, and also my 20 years in the New Age. At this point, I just want to quickly apologize for something. Earlier in the video, I said that I was a New Age activist for 20 years. I fumbled with that. I'm fumbling sometimes with my words here. I would say that I was actually actively battling for the New Age, working for something like 13 of those 20 years. But for the rest of the 20 years, roughly from the age of 15 to 35, when I began to finally discover what the church was, it was an all-consuming passion of mine. And these are things that I really noticed about New Age people over my 20 years of active engagement in the New Age movement. Just to sum up then, some of the key themes that I've experienced in my time in the New Age include this drive to being vague, elusive, undifferentiated, this drive to oneness, without celebrating differentiation, the differentiation that is necessary for real love. All of this is also tied up with the belief in the New Age that there's some kind of universal spirituality, that there's a universal spirituality that transcends all religions. And that very much also has two ideas related to it. The idea is very much there, of course, as I've said, that you don't need religion whatsoever. But paradoxically, New Agers often say, well, because we're universalist, we embrace all religions. When in fact, if you really start looking at New Age discourse, you'll find that the New Age has real hostility towards Christianity, often quite veiled. It's kind of like often not a kind of outright attack on Christianity, but just a kind of condescending sense that Christianity is outmoded, Christianity belongs to the past, maybe it was good once, without ever really understanding what Christianity is. At least I had no idea what Christianity was for 20 years in the New Age, and if I'm honest and I look back at my time with all those people, I think that Christianity was woefully, woefully, woefully misunderstood, and I don't think it was being embraced by the New Age. There's also this incredible optimistic thread in the New Age that we're evolving, we're constantly growing to greater and greater things, and in the New Age of Aquarius we've somehow reached this incredible new level of consciousness where we don't need the outmoded things of the past. In fact, the New Age is really very progressive, and a lot of what it's drawing on are ideas that are very much belonging to the left, to the cultural left. New Agers are progressives. They claim, generally, to be universal, embracing of all perspectives, but you will find very, very few New Agers who are conservatives. Trust me, they're a very rare thing. No, the New Age and the left usually go hand in hand together, and you will not find New Agers concerned, for example, about things like the Holocaust of abortion. So what I'm going to be getting to in these videos as we go through them is that although the New Age has this kind of exterior of this vague, elusive, all-embracing thing, actually when you dig deeper, you begin to find that it's actually got very tightly defined ideas. Very narrow ideas, I would actually say. So we're going to be going into what those narrow ideas are, and we're going to be talking about where they're coming from. One thing I will say right now is that so much of it is coming from the East. I mentioned before the channeled books like A Course in Miracles, but there's also a big uptake in the New Age from the theosophy of the last century, the 19th century theosophy of Helena Blavatsky, and how that extended into Alice Bailey. Out of the Alice Bailey theosophical books is very much where the idea of a New Age of Aquarius is popularized. But I'm getting ahead of myself. These are things that I'm going to be unpacking more, going to be unpacking Findhorn. But as I say, there's a lot of different things I want to talk about in the videos to come. Like my books talk about the New Age, but they talk about a lot of other things as well. And I want to talk about the liturgy. I want to talk about Christendom. I want to talk more about Catholic Ireland. I want to talk about a lot of things, not just the New Age, and my books aren't just about the New Age either. I think especially I want to talk about the power of the sacraments, because really when I look at how I transitioned from being this person who is all consumed with the New Age and really fully buying into New Age progressive universalist aspirations to the Catholic that I am today, I really have to honor the power of the sacraments working in my life day after day, week after week. That and the power of the Sacred Heart of Jesus that I spoke about in my last video. So these are all things that I intend to keep unpacking in these videos. Of course, I also go into them in my books, and there's a link down below. There's a link down below to my books. I may even put an extract or two from my books that's online. So, for example, I have online the dialogue with the New Ager called No Name. And so if you want to see how that dialogue continues and get a sense of my book, The Gentle Traditionalist, there, you can link to that as well, or I'll link to that. So those are some things that, these are themes that I intend to keep unpacking as we go on. I think that's all I'm going to say for now, except thank you for listening, and again, God bless you.